When I look at my life and see where I stand, yeah, I made it through more than they know. When I look at my life and all that I've been, every scar, every fall, every place I've been in, I'm still here breathing, still finding my way through the nights I thought I wouldn't see another day. Ain't nobody clapping for me, so I'm clapping for myself. All the times I held on when I needed help. Oh, I celebrate me for everything I survived, all the nights I cried, but still I stayed alive. I celebrate me. Yeah, I'm standing on me. Even when it's hard, I'm who I need to be. You gotta do it for yourself. Ain't nobody coming through. You gotta find your strength even when you don't want to. It's gonna be hard sometimes, it's gonna feel too much. You gon' break, you gon' cry, you gon' wanna give up, but believe me, you gon' make it even when you can't see. You're stronger than the moment, you just gotta believe. I celebrate me for everything I survived, all the storms I walked through. Still I'm here, still alive. Even with no clear view, nothing stopping me. It's your eyes, even if it don't feel like it yet. You're still standing, and that means something. No one can take that from you. Still found my way. Hey, celebrate me.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Martha Simmons with another session of Preaching and Preachers on Facebook Live and YouTube. And today I opened up with the song I Celebrate Me by Inga Rose. I think it's appropriate, certainly, for all of those who have survived gender-based violence and all of those who are working hard and surviving these times. I think it's the anthem for the year for Black men and women, especially. I Celebrate Me. Come on in. Come on in and let me know that you are out there for what I hope is going to be a very helpful and practical session. You know, I'm all about the practical, not just naming the problem, but also coming up with solutions. Come on in and let me know that you are out there, shouting out my people in the Midwest. I appreciate you joining. Shouting out my people on the West Coast who get up early to watch the live broadcast. Certainly the folk on the East Coast, and last but not least, those in the dirty South. Come on in, and when you come in, tag someone. Type in the name of a person you know will benefit from today's important, practical broadcast. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I know folk will just join. When you join, someone okay, I'm seeing the numbers now. There we go. There we go. All right. Angelita Clifton. Reverend Clifton, thank you so much. Joining from Summit, New Jersey. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Let's go ahead and get started. As always, I am praying for those who are sick, praying for those experiencing a season of bereavement. And today I am praying especially for those who are fighting against gender based violence, especially those who are doing it from the church. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Mildred Watson, so good to have you with me. Um, if you want to ask a question, feel free to. My allergies are already acting up today. It's a sunny day here in Atlanta, and the pollen is everywhere. If you want to ask a question today, feel free to put it in the chat, and if I have time, I will get to as many questions as possible. This is my last broadcast for May. Gonna get some rest. We're not even 6 months in, but if you are like me, it's already been a long year and it's a heavy year for so many reasons. So I'll see you next in June. Today I'm going to talk about how to preach a sermon concerning gender-based violence. And for those of you, if you don't catch the whole thing today, should be up on my page for 2 or 3 weeks and on YouTube so much longer. Come on in and let me know that you are out there. Okay, let's get started. This broadcast mainly concerns sermonic design, how you design a sermon, and I hope it is helpful and that everyone can at least use parts of my design, if not all of it. Remember, I'm all about doing the deed, the mechanics of 21st century preaching, and you all know the workbook. It's been out there a decade. Thank you for purchasing it. So let's get going. Gender-based violence. Let's do some numbers first. Let's do some numbers because I think it's important that people really understand what we are talking about. And so I have some statistics regarding gender-based violence in America, and these are the 2024 and early 2026 statistics from the CDC and the FBI's Unified Crime Reporting Program. We've got just a few agencies still giving us numbers for women. Over 1 in 3 women, or nearly 43.5 million women in the U.S. have experienced contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Men, more than 1 in 6 men, or 20.7 million men, have experienced similar forms of intimate partner violence. Physical, just the physical violence. 1 in 4 women, or 22.5%, have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. When we talk about daily violence, approximately 24 people per minute. 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in the United States. Just think about that horrendous number. That means that 12 million people every year are impacted by gender-based violence, okay? Fatalities, the FBI reported over 11,000 violent murders over a 5-year study period that ended in 2024, 11,000. Teen violence, roughly 1 in 3 U.S. teens have experienced some form of dating abuse, with females ages 16 to 24 being 3 times more likely to be abused by an intimate partner. When you talk about verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse, there are even more numbers. Uh, in terms of lifetime impact, 1 in 3 women, or 30%, or 38.6 million, and more than 1 in 5 men, or 27 million, have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner. Okay. And then you look at just sexual harassment and the technology facilitated abuse. Yeah, we're now in the age of technology facilitated abuse. Public sexual harassment, roughly 1 in 3 women, or 29%, and 1 in 4 men, or 7%, have experienced verbal sexual harassment in a public place. And then we look at the numbers for cyber technical abuse. Over 1 in 4 women, or 28.2%, 1 in 6 men, 15.4%, have experienced technological facilitated sexual violence. And we know that the numbers are also especially high for teens. Come on in, come on in. Let me know that you are out there. When you come in, type in the name of another person. If you are on YouTube, please share this broadcast. So, what do I mean when I say gender-based violence? We are familiar with terms like sexual assault, domestic violence, rape, but now there is an umbrella term for all of these actions, and that term is gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is one of the most devastating things that can happen in a person's life. When you're discussing gender-based violence, the term rape is often used interchangeably with the term sexual assault. But again, we're talking about a wider umbrella. So the more correct term is gender-based violence because it covers everything. In academic and theological discourse, gender-based violence is defined as any harm, physical, sexual, psychological, or structural, inflicted on a person because of their gender, or because it's because of a socially constructed gender role, excuse me. Theologically speaking, gender-based violence is a pattern of sin. It's a pattern of sin, domination, and it's distorted power that can appear in a home, in churches, and certainly in the broader society. And ministers, preachers need to preach about all of the forms of gender-based violence, okay? And in order to do that, clergy, we can't know everything, but we can study and learn. So let me give you some books. Let me give you some books that you can use to familiarize yourself with all of the types of gender-based violence. The first book is Arrested Justice: Black Women, Violence, and America's Prison Nation by Beth Ritchie. Arrested Justice: Black Women, Violence, and America's Prison Nation by Beth Ritchie, Ritchie. The second book is At the Dark End of the Street: Black Women, Rape, and Resistance by Danielle McQuire. Danielle McQuire, At the Dark End of the Street: Black Women, Rape, and Resistance. A third book is America Goddamn: Violence, Black Women, and the Struggle for Justice by Trevor Lindsay. America Goddamn Violence, Black Women and the Struggle for Justice. Another book is The Black Women's Guide to Overcoming Domestic Violence by Siobhan Lobin and Robin Gobin, Gobin, as in Nancy, The Black Woman's Guide to Overcoming Domestic Violence. And that has become a very popular book that many are reading. The next book is Southern Horrors, Women and the Politics of Rape and Lynching by Crystal Thimster, F as in Frank, Eimster, Southern Horrors, Women and the Politics of Rape and Lynching by Crystal Thimster. Then, of course, we are familiar with Womanist Midrash, a reintroduction to the Women of the Torah and Throne by Wilda C. Gaffney. It takes a look at so much of what is in women in the Old Testament, and we know it now. Those are all Black women. Let me give you a few white women. The first is the classic Text of Terror by Phyllis Tribble. That's been around, I think, 35, 40 years, but it's still helpful for understanding the Bible and gender-based violence. Text of Terror by Phyllis Tribble. Then there is and I use this one a great deal. It's called Rape Culture in the House of David by Barbara Thied. And I used it as I was developing the sermon for today because I chose a text that concerns David. Rape Culture in the House of David by Barbara Thied. That's T as in Tom, Heide as in Edward. Another book is titled Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men by Lundy Bancroft. Lundy is the first name. Bancroft, Bancroft, is the last name. Why does he do that? The next book is No Physical Bruises. What we don't know about domestic violence can kill us by Rachel Louise Snyder. No Visible Bruises. What we don't know about domestic violence can kill us. And she does a really good job of helping people to understand the patterns and the steps so that you see the red flags sooner. You see the red flags sooner. And this one is really good for teens to learn the red flags. The last book is called Entitled, How Male Privilege Hurts Women by Kate Mann, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, N again, E. Entitled, How Male Privilege Hurts Women by Kate Mann. So those are some books to help you really start to understand gender-based violence as you prepare to teach and preach on it. I don't expect us to know everything, but I do expect clergy, given that women are the majority of our churches, to be versed in this subject because you study it, okay? Now, that said, those are books. Let me talk about some of the myths because these are really harming women and men in churches, these myths. Myth number one, if a victim of gender-based violence does not fight back, they must have thought that the assault was not that bad. Okay, that's a myth. The fact is, many survivors experience tonic immobility or a freeze response, especially during rape. Okay, so just because you didn't see someone fight back, trust me, that does not mean that the event was not that bad. Myth number two, a person cannot sexually assault their spouse or partner. That's a myth. The fact is, intimate partner violence is common. It affects millions of people in the United States, and intimate partners, including spouses, okay, actually sexually assault all the time. And we also know that there's stalking by intimate partners, and so many have experienced that during their lifetime while still married, and certainly as they're separating. Myth number 3: only women and girls are the victims of gender based violence. That's a myth. The fact is that male college students are five times more likely than non students. I didn't say anything except non students of the same age to be the victims of rape or sexual assault. Male college students are 5 times more likely than non students of the same age to be a victim of rape or sexual assault. So basically, that's people from 18 to about 22. Myth number 4, and this we all have heard this one: wearing revealing clothes, behaving provocatively, or excessive drinking means that the victim was asking for it. I grew up hearing this myth. We grew up seeing it in the courts, and it still exists, especially in the courts and in churches. It's a myth. The victim's behavior or their clothing choices do not mean that they were consenting to sexual activity or violence. People have a right to wear what they want to wear, and even if they choose to drink, that does not give anyone the right to assault them physically. Myth number 5: most perpetrators are strangers to the victim. That's a myth. The fact is that most gender based violence is committed by someone that the victim knows: a neighbor, a friend, an uncle, an acquaintance, a coworker, classmate, a spouse, partner, or ex partner. It's usually someone that the person knows. Myth number 6: individuals who commit rape are mentally ill or psychotic and can't help themselves. That's a myth. That is a myth. And we've heard it a lot in the last month after several women were murdered by their spouses. The fact is that very few gender based violence perpetrators are mentally incompetent or out of touch with reality. Mentally ill people are more likely to be victims of gender based violence than to perpetrate it. So please get over that myth. Myth number 7: only gay or queer men commit gender based violence against other men. That's a myth. The fact is that most men who commit gender based violence against other men identify as heterosexual. And this fact should help highlight another reality. Gender-based violence is about power, domination, anger, and control over another person. It's only in a small way about lust or sexual attraction. It's about power, domination, anger, and control over another person. Myth number 8: people in abusive relationships stay because they accept being abused. That's the myth. The fact is that people who are abused by someone they are dating, or a spouse or domestic partner, do not stay in the relationship because they enjoy the mistreatment. The victim may stay for practical reasons such as emotional attachment, love, fear of reprisal or death, and certainly due to economics. Okay? Myth number 9, and this one is really important: there is nothing anyone can do other than law enforcement to prevent gender-based violence. That is the myth. The fact is that there are many ways that we all can help prevent gender-based violence. One, we can intervene as a bystander. When you see any gender-based violence occurring, even if it's just someone hollering, screaming, cursing, you can intercede. Are you all right? Is everything all right? What's going on? Remember, often it all begins with talking that escalates to screaming and then can escalate beyond that. Throughout my lifetime, when I have seen individuals being hollered at, screamed, especially women, I will ask, is everything okay here? To try to de escalate the situation. You also can help prevent gender based violence by supporting equality for girls and women in society. However, you can do that. You can also prevent gender based violence by teaching our children, teaching young people that gender based violence is both immoral and illegal. Okay. And of course, you can help prevent gender based violence by financially supporting and volunteering with groups that seek to end and prevent gender based violence. Okay. Let's talk about some things not to do. Remember, we're going to preach on gender based violence. Here's some things not to say as you're on your way to getting ready to preach about gender based violence. First of all, if a survivor comes to you, don't press a survivor to forgive anyone. Okay? That's up to them and God. And that's not for you to press and their discussions with their therapist. Always maintain confidentiality when talking to survivors of gender-based violence. Next, never tell a spouse or anyone else to return to someone who is physically assaulting them. When I grew up, it was common for pastors to say, if you keep praying, you've got a good man there. They work hard, etc. You keep praying, things are going to work out. That is absurd. Don't tell anyone to go back to some place where they can be beaten, okay? Next, do not fail to discuss sex and sexuality in your sermons and Bible studies, okay? That is helpful. That is really helpful. Don't say things like, young women should know how to dress for church. No one needs to see parts of your body. Learn to dress modestly and holy. You too are perpetuating gender-based violence by putting the onus on a woman, on a girl, to behave a certain way. Instead, let's teach men simply not to be violent. Now, let's get to the preaching part. Now that you know that we've begun the task of education, you pastors, ministers, preachers, everyone in churches, let's now talk about preaching after you have started to educate yourself. I chose the rape of Tamar in 2 Samuel 13 as a text to give you a design, a sermonic design for preaching against gender-based violence. All right. Number one, as I said, begin by teaching it. Don't just walk into your church and start dropping sermons about gender-based violence. You can teach it in Sunday school, certainly in Bible studies, in small groups. Prepare the ground. Prepare the ground. Prepare the ground, okay? This means also that you are studying, which is why I gave you that list of books. And let's say that you've just decided, Doc, this is just not something I'm prepared to do. There are so many competent people that you can bring in to teach on the subject. Instead of, we love to have conferences, revivals, etc. Instead of paying those people, really help the women and girls and men and boys in your church, bring in experts and they will do the teaching. Okay. And you can hold discussion groups with survivors. Be clear that we only take care of Black men in our church if we take care of Black women. There's no other way around it. We are one unit, okay? And it should not be Black men versus Black women. Now let's get to the sermon. Like I said, I chose the rape of Tamar in 2 Samuel 13, verses 1 through 22 to get, and you all remember from the workbook, Doing the Deed, I decided what my behavioral purpose was for doing this. And for me, it was to get listeners to thrive after gender-based violence and others to no longer be bystanders of gender-based violence. That's my purpose as I designed this sermon. Maybe you say, instead of a behavioral purpose, I'm going to use a proposition. I'm going to use a proposition. Here is one for this text. Our preoccupation with men in power, family dysfunction, and textual arguments have too often come at the expense of Tamar's personhood. If this text is to be preached faithfully, it must be rooted in the restoration of Tamar. In a world where violence, silence, and abandonment tried to tell her she was worthless, God restores her personhood. That can be a proposition. Or you might say, I'm not doing a behavioral purposes. I'm not doing a proposition. I'm going to raise a relevant question as I'm designing my sermon. Okay, that's fine. A relevant question could be here for this text. How does God restore possibility when violation has tried to end a story or a life with pain? Okay. Now, let's just go to preaching. And all of you who preach know that you don't just start up writing. You think about the text. You muse through the text. So before I got to here are 3 points and a close, I mused about this particular passage. And I had some thoughts especially for men who preach about gender-based violence. As I was musing on this passage, of course, my mind went to King David, who was the second head of the monarchy of Israel and is the father in the story in 2 Samuel. And I thought about David praying in Psalm 51, create in me a clean heart. And this was David's prayer of repentance after he had been scolded by Nathan for having had Uriah, an army officer, killed to get to the man's wife. And the Bible says he took Uriah's wife. And I raised this just to see where people were on Facebook. And we sanitized this. Instead of calling it rape, we say it was a taking. And at worst, both of them were guilty of infidelity. How insane. How insane. How could a woman with no power refuse the king? How does that happen? We've got women now who they're afraid of pastors, CEOs, and even a president. How did a woman who's especially one who was under a monarchy refuse the king? And I thought about David after he had been scolded by Nathan, and I said to myself, David, just saying you're repenting is not enough. Your repentance, that your clean heart, it needs to be matched with clean systems, clean decisions, and real responsibility. If repentance does not change power and power structures, then it's only language and not transformation. Then I thought about the power, especially looking at Bathsheba and David, but also the other power dynamics in this passage. And I wanted to explore the relationship between memory and power. And I described, as I designed the sermon, uh, I decided that Tamar should not have to live in obscurity, because ancient history had already had names of women who had endured and become powerful. There was the story of Hagar before Tamar, and Hagar stood up to Abraham and Sarah. There was the story of Deborah, a judge, and Jael, who killed a general as part of Deborah's team. So, in other words, there had been women of power before. So I titled this sermon, Three Dresses for Tamar. Three dresses. That first dress had to do with prayer and policy changes. Prayer and policy changes. And the second dress I looked at as a dress looking at the memories of the overcomers. Okay. Now, as I'm still musing and the sermon opens, I moved to the introduction, and I thought if a man is preaching this, he might want to begin with an apology to women, and an apology to Tamar, an apology for the fact that the church has not safeguarded the lives of so many women. Okay. Brothers, you need to apologize. There's no other way around it. If you're going to discuss gender-based violence, you've got to apologize. The Black church, the white, Latino, Asian, every church, every faith community, the Catholic church, Buddhist, everyone, okay, has done a disservice to women. The Black church has done a disservice to women, okay? And another reason I titled this sermon, the three new dresses for Tamar, is because the text says that after Tamar tore her dress, I said, that dress mattered. It was not her worth, but it was a symbol. It was a symbol. It was not her dignity, but it represented dignity. So as I'm going into the sermon, these are the things that I'm thinking about as I begin to set this sermon up, okay? And then I thought about, like I said, in that second move, what is the second move in the sermon? The memory of power and women who had overcome. And I said, there not only were there other women in scripture, there are other women in history. You're preaching to women who have currently dealt with gender-based violence, and you can do a roll call of women who have overcome and survived gender-based violence of all kinds, and you can name those women. Okay, so that's the starting out the first two moves, and I'm going to say a bit more about those moves. And that third dress, three dresses for Tamar, that third dress is for another girl, another young girl. And I want to be careful in saying this, but I also want to be emphatic. Tamar, as she recovers and gets stronger, she can become an example for another girl. But Tamar, and make sure you remember this when you're preaching this text, Tamar's pain does not exist to serve anybody else or as a lesson for anybody else. Don't set the sermon up that way. You do a disservice to Tamar. Tamar does not owe anybody, the world, she does not owe anybody her testimony, her story before she is ready. Okay? And so what I said was, after saying that, when she is ready, she can offer or sew a third dress for another young girl who has been harmed. Okay. And I would say, and like I said, I'm going to give some more specifics. As you're concluding this, make sure you point out that Tamar, and you can do this earlier in the sermon as well, but certainly by the time you conclude, make sure you say, Tamar, you didn't do anything wrong, because you've got women and girls, boys, men sitting in your congregation who have been told that their assault, that they did something wrong. But Tamar didn't do anything wrong. The shame was not hers to bear, nor to bear, nor the blame. Okay? Nor the blame. Now, let me go a little bit into that. That was just me musing. And that's what we do with passages. We just muse. Now, let me set this up particularly. Like I said, you can use a relevant question, a proposition, or a behavioral purpose to guide your message, but make sure you're hanging it on something. Don't just say, here's my text and get into it. No, hang it on something. Why are you preaching what you are preaching? Hang it on something, okay? Hang it on something. And for me, like I said, I hung mine on a behavioral purpose. My purpose was to get listeners to strive to end gender-based violence and to no longer be bystanders. So my whole sermon was set up to do that, okay? Then, as I said earlier, set up the room. Set up the room. Teach about it first. In Bible studies, Sunday school, small groups, teach about it first. If you've never preached on it, if you know your congregation is not familiar with it, make sure you set that room up first before you hit that pulpit, okay? And if it's a male preacher preaching this, you may not want to preach it as a man standing alone. You could begin in a woman's voice, that of an elder or a mother. You could do it as a second person, those kinds of things. And like I said, at some point, and I'd say early is better, apologize to Black women. Now, what's going to be in a gender-based violence sermon? A sermon against gender-based violence. What is inside that sermon? Okay. Number one, violence is there. Don't even stand up and say you're going to preach about it if you're not willing to name violence. Violence. And it was real clear to me when I started to look at some of the responses that people weren't even willing to name violence. They would say things like infidelity, etc. They weren't. Some were even okay with calling David a whore, but not violent. Okay. Number one, if it's a sermon against gender-based violence, you got to name the violence. Name the violence. Okay. Number two, in a gender-based violence sermon, there is typically not a rescue. There's typically not a rescue, especially for a woman. Sometimes there may be for men, but there's typically not for women. Okay? There's typically not. What else is in a gender-based violence sermon? In the gender-based violence sermon, and in all sermons, you're always looking for God. Where's God in this passage. If you really want to see God, because God, the name God may not appear, or any iterations of the name, just look for the oppressed in the text. Look for the oppressed. They are going to be closest to God. Okay? So, if you're looking for God, just look for the oppressed. In this text, it's Tamar. And then in a gender-based violence sermon, a sermon that's where you're trying to end it or lessen it, think about great reversals. Great reversals, okay? Meaning you want to flip the script. You're trying to change things. You're trying to end something. And you might use an illustration to help you get there. I used a metaphor because metaphors can carry a lot of weight. So I used the three dresses of Tamar. Three new dresses for Tamar. That metaphor is carrying my whole sermon along with my behavioral purpose. Now, when you're looking at the text, of course, you've always got to look behind the text. And in this case, in the ancient Near East, women were property most often. So you've always got to look behind the text. And then ask, did something historically establish what is in this particular text? And then, of course, you're looking at in front of the text and looking at us. Within the text, is there a specific type of gender-based violence? If so, you need to call out, be specific. Is it physical, hitting, slapping, beating, assault, or killing? Is it sexual, rape, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, forced prostitution, an unwanted sexual act or advance against someone? Is it sexual? Is it sexual harassment and abuse, like including in public and private or an institutional setting, right? That's what's going on in the text? Or is it psychological or emotional? Threats, coercion, verbal abuse, intimidation, blackmail, controlling behavior. All of these are types of gender-based violence that you can see in text. And certainly, as you bring your text, as you bring your sermon to your people, okay, remember these types of gender-based violence: physical, sexual harassment, psychological or emotional. Is it domestic or intimate partner violence? That, of course, includes violence within marriages or within household relationships. Is it any other harmful practice? Genital mutilation, cutting, honor-based abuse, child marriage, forced surrogacy. All of those are gender-based violence, okay? Is it socioeconomic violence, which so many women in the ancient Near East were harmed by? Denying, and that kind of violence, that means denying people resources to support themselves, or denying them the right to a livelihood. Okay, so you've got all of these types of gender-based violence. Make sure you name the one that's in your text or be descriptive, okay? Your title, make sure is short and memorable. Again, mine is 3 new dresses for Tamar, all right? Then decide if you need to define anything. For instance, regarding gender-based violence, you may need to define what it is. You may need to define what it is. People are used to terms like rape, sexual assault, maybe genital mutilation, those kinds of things. Give them a quick definition of what gender-based violence is, okay? Now, that's a big job to define it, because I just gave you 6 or 7 types that go under that umbrella. And all of that defining is so big, it's going to spill over into your exegesis. And we know that during exegesis, you ask any questions you have of the text. This is just you, God, and the Holy Spirit speaking, musing, etc., going into the text. Who are the people in the story? And why did someone ask a question once online? Why did Tamar suggest that Amnon, who raped her, why did she suggest that he should marry her and not instead of raping her? Who knows? If someone's about to rape you, you might suggest anything, okay? But that's something you can look up in terms of your exegesis and preparing for this message. Again, always look where's God in the text. And like I said, God may be in many places, but at a minimum, God is on the side of the oppressed. So look for the oppressed. At exegesis, does this text have a prehistory? In other words, did it occur as a result of something that happened earlier, okay, in history? For instance, if you're using 2 Samuel 13, you have to at least consider David and his past and read about David. What is the significance of the dress that Tamar wore? How would you describe it? What was its length, its color, its texture? Make the people see the dress. Then Ronald Allen talks about our pre-associations that we bring to text as we're doing exegesis. In other words, you've heard this sermon probably preached before. And so you have an old understanding. You have your Sunday school and the way the teacher, who of course never called David a rapist, the way that they explained it. Remember, you got those pre-associations, and you may need to undo some of that old teaching to get to a new understanding. Okay, so you've done your exegesis, you've got the people, you know the place, you know the culture, you've done that, all right? Next, like I said, make sure you got a brief title. Then get to your introduction. 3 to 5 sentences to set up the sermon. Set it up. Don't give everything away. Just set it up. In other words, brothers and sisters, this is where I am going today. Set it up. Also, at this point, if not slightly before, you may want to give a trigger warning. That's right. You may want to give a trigger warning and announce that there is help in your congregation for anyone who is triggered by today's message. Remember, you've already been teaching on it in Bible studies, Sunday school, small groups, but you still might want to give a trigger warning. And up on your screen, if you've got a screen, put a list of a national and a local organization that women can call. One national, one local, okay? Like 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-SAFE, or even 911, okay? You want to give a trigger warning before you get into the sermon. You really, really do. And then, like I said, you might want to preach as Tamar, especially if you're a man. You want men and women to hear a woman's voice. Now, let me go to how I laid out the moves. Okay. She said, I love the conversation that Father King David could have married them so she would not be disgraced. Tamar doesn't remain desolate. Her story helps women. Okay. Now, let me go to move 1 in my sermon. I said this first move concerns a dress that is torn, that can be replaced with prayer built around policy. Remember, I spoke earlier about David's whole give me a clean heart. That prayer, great prayer to pray and that's needed in this situation, but only if it's attached to structures being changed, policies being changed. And I discussed in my first move how this is not just a family tragedy, it's the story against a story of violence against women in all times and places, especially now. I gave you those numbers at the beginning for that reason. So that's my first move. And my second move, dress two. Remember, it's 3 new dresses for Tamar. My second move is the memory dress. It's the memory dress sewn due to this cast of characters. A memory dress sewn due to this cast of characters. And so in move 2, I really give you more information on who Tamar is. Then I talk about Jonadab and Amnon, who are the rapist and the conspirator. Yes, I talk about David. David in this instance is the father, and he's the gender-based violence bystander who could have done so much and yet did nothing. And I also talk about, because like I said, ask yourself, was there some prehistory that led to some of this? David lived in the shadow of his own guilt for what he did to Bathsheba, who was his victim, his wife, later the mother of his 5 children. And there was this man he killed. Okay. And I think Bathsheba is the 8th or 9th woman with whom David is linked at the time of this text. So I talk about David as part of the cast of characters: Tamar, Jonadab, Amnon, David, and then there's Absalom, the Avenger. These are in my second move. I'm giving you the cast of characters, and I say about Absalom that he started out honorably, but he went too far. He let his anger simmer, and it led to ultimately an insurgent revolt inside against his father and inside the house of David. And if you look, and this is what anger will do if you let it fester too long. If you look at 2 Samuel 16, and again, this is doing that exegesis work, Absalom becomes a rapist too. Okay, you can't become what you hate. But if you go to 2 Samuel 16, that's what you're going to find. Then in move 3, I said that third dress, 3 new dresses for Tamar, that third dress after Tamar and all of the women basically, and men, of course, anyone to whom you're preaching. I said that torn dress was real, but it was not final. The pain was real, but it was not final. The violation was real, but it was not final. The abandonment was real, but it was not final. God had more opportunities than what shame tried to bury in Tamar and in those to whom you are preaching. So behind the one dress that was torn, God had at least 3 new dresses. And that third dress is for a little girl who will need to face, or a little boy even, who will need to face gender. Like I said, the majority in our congregations are women, need to face gender-based violence. So I'm very specifically doing women, but you can choose to cover everybody and give yours a different approach. My sanctified imagination, and this is where you get into midrash, which is why I mentioned the Gaffney book earlier, tells me that there was so much fallout, but the restoration of Tamar is part of the fallout too. Tamar's attack, as I said, it doesn't exist to serve anybody else as a lesson. That's not why you're doing this sermon. She doesn't owe the world her story. Okay, she doesn't owe anybody anything until she's ready, if ever, to share. She can spend as much time grieving, resting, and healing as she chooses to. But Tamar does live after the rape. She does live. And so after she finishes grieving and she is healing, she can choose to sew a new dress for another girl who she knows will be up against gender-based violence. Then, for my conclusion to this sermon, I said I could either lament, which is allowing people to just sit quietly at the end of the message with soft music. We need to do more lamenting in our churches. I don't have any problem with praise and worship and hooping, and I don't have any problem, but that can't be all the time. So you need to teach people how to lament. We really need to do that, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. But for those who say, Doc, I still want to find a way to celebrate Tamar and uplift women and girls and men and boys who survive gender-based violence. If you want to do that, you can say more about these 3 dresses and what they can offer. Remember, dress 1 is a dress of prayer that's tied to policy. Dress 2 is that memory dress, because other women have survived and they can help others survive. Other men have survived and they can help others survive. Dress 3 is that dress that gets sewn for another young person. And so you can talk about how uplifting it is to have these dresses for someone else. And again, at the end, make sure you have your next step ready. It's going to take some work to do this sermon, okay? Have the next step ready. So in other words, you may say, after today's sermon, we're going to have a continued Bible study on, or we got a small group on, or we're bringing in someone next month. Whatever you're doing, have the date ready. Have the date ready. Don't just get up, talk about it, do a surface thing, and stop. Okay, don't do it that way. So again, just summing up, set up that room, look behind the text and at today's text. And, a part, of course, deciding about how you want to approach the text is deciding, do you want to be priestly, prophetic, use a womanist voice, a feminist voice? You're making all of those decisions, of course, as you're determining your approach. You want to preach it as in second person, third person, etc. And of course, as you're musing and looking at all kinds of scriptures, make sure you read it in the NRSV UE, meaning updated edition, the Jewish Bible, and the NIV at least. Okay? Then do your exegesis. Remember those pre-associations. Lay out the sermon and its moves. And however you choose to close. And of course, I forgot to say, make sure you do your trigger warning in the beginning. However you choose to close, lament or celebration, do it on purpose. Do it on purpose. And then after the sermon, have resources available. That's it. That's it. This should help you preach and design a sermon on gender-based violence. Okay. Thank you. For those who are watching, especially on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for hitting my Cash App. As an independent scholar, you help me do what it is that I do. Will somebody put my Cash App in the chat, love my work 1, 2, 3. I'd appreciate it. Again, we need to talk about gender-based violence more. Don't just do one sermon for Mother's Day or Women's Day or any and think that's enough. I gave you the numbers at the beginning, and the numbers are going up, not down. It's a critical subject. So if you have at least 2 revivals at your church every year, you should at least preach on this at least twice a year and offer support. If your church can provide it, there's so many groups out there, national and local, that can. Make sure that you have that information available. And last but not least, as I always say, share the video. It won't cost you anything, and this will help some other preachers. As I said at the beginning, I don't expect us to know how to do everything. I don't expect us to know how to do everything, but we can learn. And when it comes to gender-based violence, we must. So much is at stake. If we love the people in our churches, we must do this. God bless. I hope that everyone has a good week. As I said, this is it for me for May. I'm going to enjoy the rest of it. I'll see you guys again in June. Take care, everyone. God bless.